Outer Orange.
Привет! Welcome back to another video, guys. Today we are going to be running down the premium deck set, Palemoon and the Grand Blue stuff in it. Basically, you just recently got yourself the premium deck set, right? And you have a Grand Blue deck, which is what we're primarily going to be focusing on today. Well, what can you do to upgrade that Grand Blue deck? That's what we're going to talk about today. So basically, we're going to have three different categories. We're going to have a must-haves category. This is me only Grand Blue cards. It's pretty much cards that you should probably definitely pick up because you'll be either be using them now, later, down the road, etc. Then I'm going to have a kind of most likely maybe category where you'll most likely need these cards, but there'll also be some elementals and probably from other formats like D format cards in here as well. And then there's the no category that's going to be pretty small. It's just like some recent cards that come out that you definitely don't need. And then basically like everything else is kind of just up in the air. But we're just gonna go back from there. So I'll start with the must-haves. We're gonna go into strides first, then we're gonna go ahead and then jump into other stuff. So for strides, the first one is definitely Bad Bounty. 100% you should probably pick up another copy or two. I believe the deck set comes with one. You may want three if you want. You can get the full playset, but if you don't want the full playset, definitely at least grab one more. I would recommend three just so you can maneuver between them, because sometimes in certain metas you will go into it at least twice. And sometimes for Flip Father, if you want to flip another one, you know, you can go into that. But definitely at least grab one more copy. That we have the Big Obadiah. So, well, you get one already. I do recommend grabbing a second one if they're. I don't remember exactly the ratios, but if there's, you should definitely grab probably a playset. These do come up. It's a slower card, obviously, but it's still really useful. Sometimes you find yourself striding to this in very random situations just because of the flip itself. So sometimes it does come up. It's a pretty good card overall. So I definitely recommend grabbing more of this card as well. You probably want another Bartholomew. You don't really need a second copy, but I would say if you're going to be grabbing bulk, you might as well grab one more. So you only really need two. I think two is a really good number. Playset, definitely not. This is an end game card, so you're never gonna be using it. But again, you may want to have the second copy just in case. Say you go into it, but you don't have the condition, and you decide to go into it again for whatever reason. Just good to have that second copy just in case. You'll usually in the G zone only have one. There are some decks that play into this as like a main win con, so they actually run multiple copies of this. So I do recommend at least grabbing one more. And then going into some G guards here, you definitely want to grab this card. It's called Negro Mode. This card does come up. It's sometimes the effects are really weird as all the G guardians. Sometimes you want to go into this instead. Basically, Soulbots get a bunch of shield based off your drop, so it just kind of stacks really well. It does come up. You really only need one copy, but I do recommend just grabbing one just for those off case situations. So you do want to grab another Negro Lily. There's two that comes in the set. I do recommend having a third copy. There are times where you will Negro Lily 3 times. It can happen. It won't happen too often, but it's always good to have the extra copy. So feel free to grab whichever copy you want of that. And I think last but not least for the strides is we have Negro Nora. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Necro Nora. There she is, Necro Nora. So if I'm not mistaken, this card is there's one copy in the set. You definitely want a second one. There are very rare occasions where you'll actually be using this twice. Sometimes it's just for the flip itself. You just want to flip just to have higher GB for whatever reason. But I definitely recommend having two. Just two total. There's one in the set, and then if there isn't a second copy, definitely grab a second copy of this. So that's it for the strides. Going into just the regular cards, you definitely want two more copies of this. I believe the deck set comes with two. You definitely want a full playset. So whatever that means it gets to a full playset, get a full playset. This card is sometimes a 4 of, sometimes a 3 of, sometimes a 1 of, sometimes a 2 of. It jumps so much. Just get your playset. They're cheap, and just call it a day there. You definitely want Greed Shade. I am definitely a big advocate for Greed Shade. Greed Shade is just such an amazing card. You should just have a playset of this, especially if you're going deep into Grand Blue, especially if you're building for premium. You should have 4 copies of this card. Columbard is at 4. You should definitely have this at 4 too. I think this card is stronger a lot of the times than Columbard is. It does flip sometimes meta is different, but I think Reach 8 is a lot of the engine of Grand Blue. Definitely need your playset, so grab your playset of that. I do recommend also in the same ballpark to grab 2 more Night Roses. This almost falls into the maybe category. I say this because Grand Blue meta shifts a lot. If you're going to be grabbing all this bulk anyway, you might as well grab the 2 extra Night Roses. If you really can't afford it, it's not the end of the world. However, the deck set is actually built to where you can build it towards Night Rose as well. You don't have to change too much to make it a Night Rose build, and that's why I say you might as well just have options for both decks, since it already is built for basically both of them. You might as well just grab the roses. Hopefully they drop a little bit from the price I'm seeing right now, but I would recommend 2 more Night Roses. I know it's a lot to ask since that is kind of a big price, but I will say being able to interchange between both boss units is pretty important. Some people even want a 3-3 split where they run 3 Beatrices and they run 3 Night Rose. So personally, I think you definitely could use a playset, but like I said, if it's too costly, it's not the end of the world. Just keep in mind you can't play Night Rose focused deck even if you want to. Another thing, keep in mind there is future stuff coming out. The new Clan Collection sets that are dropping with the new Night Rose stuff is Night Rose focused, so you're probably gonna want the cards anyway. So I would say just say screw it and grab it, especially if you're gonna keep playing Grand Blue. After that, we have Negro Bone. Now I was very surprised. I actually thought this card was at 4, but when I was looking through my deck set, I noticed there's only 2. You definitely want to play set of this card. This is an insanely strong card. You definitely want the play set. You won't always be playing this at 4, but you might as well just grab them because this is just such a versatile card. We got Cody the Ghosty. This is kind of like a one-of card. Just you can just kind of throw it in your card. It's a one-of. This card really comes up a lot with Night Rose, but also into weird meta calls. This card does come up quite a lot. Basically, if something gets retired, you can call this instead. So into weird meta calls, this comes up. I say if you are, while you're grabbing all the bulk, you might as well add this to the list. It's pretty cheap and it will come up. You don't need a play set. You could probably grab 1 to 2 copies max and be okay. You won't always be using this card, but it's just good to have, especially if you're sticking to Grand Blue. Ganache. So Ganache is definitely a staple. You should definitely have at least 1 copy of this. I did get a reprint recently, so it's not like super expensive. Just get the pretty version of it. This is your counter charger. You almost always be playing this like 9 out of 10 times until there's a better counter charger that comes out. There's been good alternatives with this card, but there hasn't been like a straight replacement that does what this doesn't already do. I think there's been some metas where there's been some small shifts with Cutlass and stuff like that, and maybe some maybe Rain the Cray Elemental tier, but overall you should definitely have 1 copy of this. You're usually going to be using it. Then we got Tommy the Ghosty Brothers. Now keep in mind in the deck set you actually do get these, but I will say these are better for most situations. I would say just go ahead and grab your 4, get a play set, call it a day. It's a great 3 searcher. It does come up. It's also shield if you go towards the ghosty build. It is still a ghosty, and it's for consistency purposes. This card's pretty nuts, so I recommend just grabbing them. The Banshee, I'll start with the Repsies Banshee. This is a crit. This is pretty versatile. I would grab the 4 copies. This will come up. It doesn't always come up. I will say that it being a 5k defense can be very hurtful, but into certain builds where you want to go through your deck really fast, replenish soul really fast or whatever, this card's pretty much a staple in some situations, but a lot of people don't like it because of the 5k, which is understandable. There's 3 different versions of it that you can grab. You should grab it. And then the next one is actually the Wild Seas Banshee. This is also something you don't need 4 copies of, but it would be good to have at least 2. I would recommend just grabbing all 4 just so you can jump around between them, because this is basically the other Banshee, but just this is a GB1 locked card. So when metas are a little slower and you can get GB1, you can get to GB1 pretty comfortably, this will be the better card, but the other card is better for early. This is a better later game card. The other one's a better early game card, so you can make that decision between them. I would grab the playset of both of them just so you can interchange between them. In terms of just raw defense, this is definitely the better card, but in terms of like early unbricking yourself, the other card definitely performs better. So that's pretty much, I think that's it for the for the must-haves actually. So let's go into the most likely. So we're gonna start with strides. This is most likely but not mandatory. Like you should be fine without them, but you can choose to get these if you feel you want to. Just if you're like just crazy about Grand Blue or you just want to just own everything, then this is definitely the place where you want to start. This is like the techie. I want to show this the techie side of things. So once you start experimenting, if you want to just have if you want to have the arsenal to constantly tech, and Grand Blue does. Grand Blue's deck changes so much that you will be teching a lot, especially if you're really deep in the sauce with Grand Blue. So with that being said, you will actually most likely need all of these cards. However, if you're not super in the sauce, these aren't mandatory. The other ones are like mandatory. These are like, you will need these, but it's not the end of the world if you skip out on them type of thing. Negersonger is definitely the highest on this list. This is a very weird like off tech card, and I actually don't think you need it that much. It's probably the more on the lesser side of needs aside from the other ones I'll be showing, but it's a multi-attacker type of card. Does some weird stuff. It's not terrible, but if you really want, you can probably grab 2 copies if you're bulking it out and just kind of call it a day. Next we got the Cyclone card. This is definitely one of those like if maybe situations. I would just grab this because you can play this in multiple decks, so you should definitely just have access to these. Basically, if you have vanillas, you can pretty much get extra power on your vanilla cards, and tokens do count towards this. And then if you play more vanilla card type archetypes, then you can throw this into random decks, not just Grand Blue, just in general. This card just comes up quite a bit. And then next we have Sea Breeze. This is another card that you should probably just go ahead and pick up Apparently I spelt it wrong. Sea Breeze is another card you might want to grab. Basically, this card lets you stride without having to... It lets you stride if your opponent isn't allowing you to stride. Meta will shift. This is like a good one-of card. Meta will shift, and this has come up in Grand Blue before. It'll come up in probably in other metas as well. Maybe not the meta we're going into, but long story short, you may need this card. It is kind of getting less important, like that's why it's in the maybe slot. But there may be a time where this will come up. This one is definitely a meta call card. This is definitely like a tech card, and holy crap, that's a pricey one. But anyway, what the... Oh my god, this is the comic Fiesta version. I didn't even know this card exists anymore. Someone like actually, oh, these are recent sales. Oh my god, I actually might grab this. This is a very rare card. I'm pretty sure this is rare. I don't even know what this looks like in real life. But anyway, long story short, this card lets you play into very specific metas where your opponent can't touch like a certain card on your board. It's a very meta call card. You don't always need it, but it does come in handy. So it's a little pricey, as you can tell, but it hasn't had a reprint in a second. You know, it's kind of a hard card to find. It's kind of old. This is a 2016. This one's a 2019 card. So, you know, it's been a couple years. So that's why it's kind of the price that it is. Hopefully you'll get a reprint in the future. These are the Ultimate Stride cards. This is Ball and Arena. Again, this is a maybe card. You don't like always need this. This is one of those cards you could probably skip out on, but if you really just want to, if you want to just have access to the arsenal of like, say you're not just playing Grand Blue and you're playing Bermuda Triangle and Aqua Force as well, this is definitely a card you may want to have just because you can alternate between all three decks. So you're not just pushing it for one deck. You're not just investing to one deck, you're investing to multiple decks. Like I said, if you're pretty invested and you want to keep going, you might as well grab it type of thing, but this is definitely not like a mandatory card. It's definitely like a if maybe situation, and it does come up, but it comes up so rarely that you don't really need it. And it is definitely like a meta call card too. There's like certain metas where this card just doesn't exist at all. There's other metas where the card exists more. It all depends on how fast or slow the meta is, and Megiddo falls under this exact same category. So here we have Megiddo. This is the ultimate stride, like the ultimate finisher card, essentially. Basically, what after this, your whole G-Zone goes away if you don't kill your opponent, so it's like actual death. This card's really good in Grand Blue. It's pretty good in Bermuda. I don't know what it does in Aqua Force, to be honest with you guys, but long story short, it is a finisher, but it's a really, really rare finisher. But as I mentioned before, meta shifts, and sometimes this is the go-to because, as I mentioned before, the Skull Dragons, you want to have a playset. The reason why I want to have a playset is because this card plays into the Skull Dragons extremely well. If you have 4 dragons on the board, you're constantly swinging with all 4 of them, and you can actually even get more out after that. So long story short, you're swinging with huge-ass dragons. Aside from Bad Bounty being a finisher, there's actually 3 different ways you can finish in Grand Blue now. This is one of them. So I will say this one's a little bit more important than the Ball and Arena probably, but it's not mandatory. It has gone down though. This is a pretty good price for the card. It used to be way more expensive, so I will say, like, if you added the 2, I'd say this one's will probably come up. It might come up more. It's kind of a weird card. You can kind of just grab this if you just want to have access to it. It's not bad, but you do need 2 copies of him, so you have to, because of he flips himself. But it's okay. It's just another way to call cards out. It's nothing crazy, but you know, it's just a good off tech card. Sometimes situations will happen where he might come up and you can just run him in your G zone. It's just a tech card basically. The next one is also a tech card. It's the Corpse Dragon. This is the emergency button dragon. Basically just lets you mill a little bit while also being able to G guard. It's just one of those things where if your mill just sucks really bad, you can, you know, just go into this and just kind of help yourself a little bit, but it's nothing crazy. This card's not that insane. Definitely like a one-off card, and you won't always be using it. Again, it's just a meta type call. Another is the Galleon. So this is the old GB8 cards. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually more in like the no category of this card. You could definitely skip on this card. However, it is good to just have it in your G zone, and meta will shift. And again, because meta shifts, you got to move your tech stuff around because Grand Blue adapts to meta super well. And because of that, sometimes this card might come up. And because it's a GP8 with no cost on it, it is technically another version of a finisher. The other thing is, because it has no cost on anything, you can just stride this without doing anything. It's just a vanilla stride. Vanilla striding used to be way more potent like a couple years back. In premium, not so much nowadays because the meta is a little too fast for vanilla strides. If you're vanilla striding, you're probably losing the game. But back then it used to be like there used to be times where you'd go into this just to go into it, not necessarily for the effect. So long and behold, you don't need it, but if you really are a Grand Blue fanatic and you really want to stick to Grand Blue, you do want to have 1 copy in those emergency situations. Next we have Racktome. Racktome is a discard draw card. This is another emergency button card. This is one of those things where, like, if your hand sucks, you can can pitch a ghost ship and then draw into something better. Your hand sucks, pitch a skull dragon, draw into something better. This is like a, oh god, I hope I draw into another heal guardian after this because my hand's looking kind of doo-doo. That, or you can do this as a way to just flip, just to purposely flip without having to use any resources, since all you really need to do is just discard. Whereas some of the other G guards force you to have to soul blast, force you to have to counter blast, and resources in Grand Blue is insanely important, insanely high. So because of that, you'd rather just G guard into this. Say your opponent swings greedily, it's like their last attack, and you just want G guard to G guard. This is one of the best things to G guard into. So that's pretty much that. And then last but not least, which is another interesting G guard that not many people use, it's the Culburn. I used to use this a lot. It has pretty much essentially the same effect as the one we just saw. But it works off of how big your opponent's hand is. It just has different shield value, basically. You basically discard a card, and when it's placed, you get plus 5k power for every 2 cards in your opponent's hand. So if their hand is massive, this just goes up like crazy. So it's pretty useful, pretty rare. Like I said, not always a situation. You can definitely just have like 1 copy, call it a day. I ran it at some point, and I really loved it. I haven't had a reason to run it since I ran it at some point, but I will say this card does come up on a very rare occasion. So that's that. And then this is just the strides going into our non-strides. We have Sleeve Tugging Bell. This is definitely one of those cards that you want to pick up. You only need 1 copy. If you play D, you already have it, type of thing. This lets you unbind stuff, which is very useful into binding matchups, or just to pretty much piss on your opponent and let them know like, hey, they're not touching it, they're not gonna be able to bind your stuff for too long. It's a really good card to have overall. It's not mandatory. It's definitely like a tech card, but it's a tech card you want to have access to, especially if you're going to be very potent about playing Grand Blue. Chappie the Ghosty falls under the same category. Basically, this card lets you deck thin for free by just guarding with it. And because it's a ghosty, it works with Beatrice, and you can also call it off of drop zone effects with Neganora as well. So you can technically deck thin too. You can guard with it once, and you can guard with it again in the future. So basically, you can emergency deck then 2 cards out of deck without using any cost. By the way, the first one, when you guard with, there's no cost at all. The only downside of this card is that's a grade 0, so it's increasing your chance of G assisting if you're trying to keep things more consistent. This card prevents you from that. Next is Daft the Ghosty. I personally think this is like almost a staple. However, most decks do not run Daft the Ghosty. I'm one of the people that runs it, but a lot of people don't. Basically, this lets you double draw discard, which is super huge for Grand Blue early on. I think it's very important. However, because of the fact that most people don't run this card at max copies, I chose to put it in the maybe category, since I feel like it's not as mandatory. Basically, you might as well just grab a playset if you do grab this. I think it's very useful. Because you are running these, you do have to change your trigger ratios a little bit, which I don't think is a bad thing. You have to run more crits, and I think crits are good. But it also means that you can't run the other Sentinels as much, which can also come up and can be useful. And because of that, this card can be it's more of an A for maybe category. But it's Doubt the Ghosty. It's still Ghosty as well, so it still falls into the Beatrice category of having shield. It is still a 5k shield, so it can come up. And also, it's a grade 1 perfect guard, which I think is massive. Those do come up. There are guard restricts out there, and the fact that you can play these and play the zeros does help into those weird matchups. So I say pick it up, but you know, it's not a very popular pick as much as it used to be. Candelaria. So this is basically a token generator card that lets you play into like really weird bind matchups and kind of helps you out. However, it's not mandatory. It's definitely like a 1 of 2 of thing. I would say 2 is probably a good spot to just have. Urgula comes up into the bugs matchups a lot, or into any matchup that tries to touch your stuff a lot. If you don't want your Night Mist, or Night Storm, whatever the grade 3 is, the old one that lets you multi-attack. If you don't want him pop, this is a really good card to have. She has resist on her. Basically, your opponent can't touch your stuff, so it's really nice. So you do, sometimes it does come up. So she is a definitely, if maybe you only need 1, you don't usually have enough room for 2 unless you're running some really wacky stuff. Next is Bilber. Bilber is another one of those cards that like, it definitely just depends on what your kind of build you're building, but it can come up. So I recommend grabbing a playset, but you don't need it. It lets you mill through your deck really fast. You can do some really interesting loops with it, along with the Crit Soul Banshee. So you can do some funny stuff with this. You can, and all unplaced abilities will activate off of this card. Just does some nutty stuff. It will come up if you want to speed up your deck. This is one of the best way to do it. Navigator. Navigator is another good card to pick up. It's definitely an if maybe card, but you can definitely use it along with Bilber and a couple other cards to just kind of accelerate your deck really fast if you want to go for like the deck out milling approach and go into like some crazy late game plays, right? So there's that card. And then next we have Huntley. Huntley, I put in the maybe category because it's a Cray Elemental, but to be honest, it's probably gonna be in the must category because it's just such an opponent card, and especially now it's getting a revamp ability, and because of that, I think this card's gonna be even more insane. And so because of that, I highly recommend grabbing at least 2 copies of this card, maybe even a full playset just to kind of have. But this card, I want to put in the must category, but because it was not a Grand Blue card, I took it off the must category because it's still just a tech card at the end of the day. However, this tech that card is just so important and so impactful that you might as well just consider it a staple. It will change depending on meta. You don't always have to play this at 4, and that's why, like I say, you don't need it, but it's very highly recommended because it's not just about the Grand Blue deck at this point. You will probably want these for just most of your decks if you choose to play outside of Grand Blue. Tunnels is not as common. This is definitely like a one-off tech. Sometimes I guess bugs this really helps, and just into weird situations. Great Nature really likes this card, but in Grand Blue it's just okay. Sometimes it just comes up, sometimes it doesn't. Definitely not mandatory. Mistoff falls under this category as well. If you're dealing with a lot of farming decks, this is an insanely good card to have. I used to run this because a Great Nature and Palemoon just farmed like crazy, and Highlander too. So to lower that farm, I would just plop this down and then try to kill them with their 8-card hand. Keep in mind it works on both sides, so you have to discard 2. Then the Ghosty is a weird one. A lot of people don't know about this card. I'm bringing it up because people don't know about this card. Basically, if it's mode from deck, you can still bust to call it out. This is a really good off tech with Beatrice. If you're trying to build a Beatrice deck, this actually works really well because you can early rush with this card. If you can mill it out early and rush with it. The Soul Blast is kind of important too if you want to Soul Blast out certain pieces, and also it's just guard value. And yeah, you can just do some funny stuff with this. So I like to put on the list of the maybe list, but you only need like 1, max 2 copies. It's just another one of those. Quincy is another one card that's like a if maybe situation. Lets you can send back the over trigger if you want. So because you can do that, this is like another one of those like techie cards. Like it might come up, it might not. Derek the Ghosty. I bring this card up because it can bind itself, and then you can send a normal unit back and then mill cards. It's kind of a weird way of milling. You can bind and unbind with Bell, so you can just do some funky stuff with this if you're going towards the Beatrice route. Nothing insane, but you can do it. Just the Ghosty is another alternative to countercharging that you can do. Not a mandatory, but definitely a good card to have, like at least at 1. I would recommend getting a whole play set because if you want to go super heavy Beatrice, you can actually just run like a ton of these just for the Beatrice engine. If you want to go like the Beatrice boss unit approach, this is definitely a card that you'd want to see more of, so you can grab a playset of it, but it's not mandatory. You don't need it. It's just nice to have. Dewey is a old counter-charging soul charging card. It's getting an upgrade soon, so actually this card might come up pretty useful. But this card you might see more use in this card in the future, especially with Beatrice as well, so you might as well grab yourself a playset if you're on the list, but it's not mandatory. Rick the Ghosty falls under this category too. Some people like running the 3-1 split with 3 Heal Guardians and 1 Rick the Ghosty just because of the raw 25k shield that this provides under Beatrice. If you want to go towards a tanky build, having like 1 or 2 copies of this isn't too bad either. It's just a vanilla heal. Also, again, with the Cyclones, in case you're running with stuff like that, again, this will come up as well and make him bigger, but you'll rarely be ever doing that. But you can. The thing is, you can run Cyclone, you can run some vanilla stuff, and then guess what? This guy will be beefier, and then you can guard with him and do some fun stuff. So that's him. Next we have Pat the Ghosty. Pat the Ghosty is another more tank build approach that you can do. You can pretty much bind him. Insanely high shield. He'll become like a 20k shield. You can bind multiple copies in from drop, and you just get like insanely high shield value of it, and then you can use Kentucky Belt to unbind it and then do it all over again. So it's just like a never-ending tank build. From here on out, there's some vanilla cards, like any Grand Blue vanilla cards. If you wanted to have that Cyclone access, you can grab the grade 1s and 2s off of those. There's nothing too crazy. Damien the Ghosty, this is again part of the Beatrice engine. You can just pick up these to just keep the Beatrice engine going if you want to build towards Beatrice. It's a counter charger, multi-attacking type of thing, so you can do that. Next is Performing Zombie. It's another like a card that's in and out, been coming in and out. Basically on rear guard, you can, when he's placed, you can look at top 10, mill 1, and shuffle your deck. So it's just a stand that you can constantly keep milling with. You can keep sending it back and milling some more, sending it back and milling. Basically just another loop card. Not mandatory, but you can choose to grab like 1 or 2 copies, or get yourself a place and just kind of roll with him. Next is the Rain Elemental Tier. So this is really useful when you have the Cyclone specifically. Otherwise this card's not that great, but it's another counter charger. Basically you could Soul Blast to a counter charge. Pretty useful. It can come up, so you just never know. And then I think last but not least, at least for the maybe slot, is actually the Water Sprouts Djinn here. So another counter charger. I'm not the craziest fan of this card because it's a from hand effect, but it can come up in it's like, again, like a if maybe situation. You might as well grab, if you really want to, you can grab yourself the playset and just see where it goes. Like there might be some situations where he might be useful. I do have a small don't need list. It's pretty small. It's nothing crazy. I think any strides that I haven't mentioned are pretty much on the you don't really need category, but the main ones is actually from some of the recent stuff. One of them is King Serpent. I don't think that this is from the new one specifically. This is another counter charger. I don't really think you need it. It's kind of bad. It's from the new stuff, so that's why I'm kind of like specifically talking about it. You just play Jesse. I think Jesse's just the better version of this. The Soul Charge can maybe come up, but I just don't think you need this. And the other one's actually Ruin Shade. I'm sorry, it sucks because I actually love Ruin Shade so much. But Ruin Shade is not one of those milling cards that is just kind of there but doesn't really do anything. You don't really need it. I don't think there will ever be a meta where this card will be useful again. It's definitely gotten power crept, so you might as well just kind of ignore it. I think that's basically it on the don'ts. Like I said, any strides I didn't mention are probably on that list because they're either old or they're just not useful. There might be the Night Rose stride that might come up because, you know, there's like the little revamp that's going on with the strides that's coming up. But aside from that, the other strides are pretty dead. No, it's not the Night Rose stride. It's the on attack, when attack doesn't hit you do stuff stride. But basically, most of the other strides are either 7Cs related or they're just not very strong. And then a lot of the other cards that I haven't mentioned are either on a different archetype list or they just aren't played anymore. I might have missed a card here or two. I tried my best to kind of hit the ballpoint of every card I could think of that I've used and that I've seen in lists like that, in lists that I've seen. And I think I even mentioned cards that haven't even been in lists. So I think I nailed most of them. If I missed anything though, please feel free to leave comments below of any other cards you think that would be good as like mandatory text and like maybe text. Keep in mind, like I said, for the mandatory text, I only specifically talked about grand blue cards. I'm not talking about D cards or Cranial Elementals or anything like that. And then the maybe situation where most of the texts is where all the Cranial Elementals and all that kind of stuff starts popping up at D cards. There might be some D cards that are coming out, may have come out in the last like set or two that might be useful. I did realize I missed one thing, an Elementaria Sanctitude. You may need this card. It's definitely in the maybe category. I completely didn't put it on my list, but this is definitely a maybe card. It does come up. You can use it. So yeah, definitely, you can definitely think about this card as well too. But I think for the most part, this is a really good starting point. If you've been kind of putting cards in your shop, in your list right now, I think you're doing a good job. Everything you've grabbed in there will definitely come useful. You'll definitely see it will definitely upgrade your deck. You're gonna have an insanely strong deck. So I hope this helped you. Choose to buy any of these cards on 50 cards. Do not forget to use code ORANGE. You'll get a small little discount from me. It'll help us both out. So if you choose to get some cards from there, just keep in mind you can do that. He's doing a big revamp right now. There's a big sale going on, so just keep in mind you can grab those cards there. Aside from that, I'm gonna head out now. I did a lot of talking. Like I said, I made this video just for you. I hope it helps you out there. I hope you guys are able to enjoy premium. I'm sorry I can't do the Palemoon side of things. I just don't know it as well, but I am here for the Grand Boo side of things. Hope it helps you. Hope you're enjoying your Beatrice fun. Grand Boo's an amazing freaking clan. It's my favorite in premium. I've had a freaking blast with this. I hope you do as well. Other than that, guys, I'm gonna catch you guys next time. Peace out now. Peace out. Bye bye now. Bye, guys. Bye.